Okay, I'm going to call this August 13th, 2018 meeting of Planning and Zoning to order. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes from the last time, from July 9th. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion. Second.
All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? None. Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is a public hearing to discuss the request to take action for a zone change from R1 single-family residential to R2 single-family residential for Lot 89, City Block 54, property ID 13112, located on Appleby Sand Road. Mr. Manti.
Good evening, Council. Good evening, Commissioners. Leo Menti for the city. So the agenda item before us tonight, it's a rezone from R1 to R2 on the property that is located on Lot 89, City Block 54, which is approximately 0.85 miles north Loop 200 Loop Northeast Orleans, let me put that way, and it's along Apple Sand Road. If you go over and give me the PowerPoint on the screen, the PowerPoint, yeah. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So I have a location map showing the property in question. It's approximately 15 acres. It's currently wooded, and like I said earlier, it's along Appleby Sand Road. The applicant intends to rezone this from R1 to R2 to allow for the building of single-family homes. And I want to point out again, this is to allow for the building of only single-family homes. The applicant in question has already done some developments in the city, which are worth recommending, lovely homes that he has built in the past. And so staff believes these single-family homes would also be something that will be of great contribution to the neighborhood. As you can see on your screens, I have a map showing the location. It's right just on the western side of it. On the western, it's vacant land with some residents. On the eastern side is right outside the city limits, which is our ETJ. So staff believes that this subdivision could be a catalyst to allow for more development in the ETJ as it is now. In current times, we've seen a lot of single-family homes going outside the city limits, and so we are pleased that an applicant had decided to build within the city limits, and that is, we believe, is one of the good concepts of infill development, which every city would like to see. It's always good to develop within before you think of the external factors. I have a location map showing the aerial, and as you can see on your map, it's very wooded, it's vacant. And I would believe the applicant has plans of building about, demarcating into about 60 single-family lots, if given the nod. We did talk to him. He talked about having an HOA to maintain this property, and so we believe it's going to be to the best use. The applicant proposes to have walking trails and benches, and to add a park to the subdivision as well. So we believe it's going to be an improvement for that area. Having a look at other subdivision, we believe this subdivision will actually be an improvement on some existing subdivision within the city. I have a picture here showing the street layout along Appleby Sand Road, showing this property. So I'll go to zoning. The current zoning for this property is R1, which allows for single-family homes. The proposed rezoning is R2, which allows for single-family homes. The only difference between these two zoning districts is the lot size requirements. R1 allows for minimum lot size of 8,250 square feet, whereby the R2 allows for minimum 6,000 square feet. Based on initial preliminary plan shown by the applicants, the minimum lot size we are seeing here will be 6,500 square feet. And we've had phone calls from citizens talking about why the decrease in lot sizes. And I want to point out the fact that the decrease in lot sizes does not mean decrease in housing sizes. The only major difference we have seen with R1 and R2 is that most R1 houses have larger backyards, but R2 will probably also have decent, building sizes, but with smaller backyards. There's a need to consider different housing options. Somebody can afford to have a bigger home with a big backyard to maintain it. Not everybody has the time to have a bigger home with a bigger backyards. If you drive around so many cities, even here in Nacogdoches, people have bigger homes and smaller yards. People have smaller homes with bigger yards. So we believe this will give the option to have bigger homes with smaller yards. So the reduction in lot sizes does not necessarily mean they are going to be smaller rental homes or smaller houses. It's going to be R1 single family homes. It's going to have the exact unique characteristics like houses existing within that area. And so I want to point out the fact that the reduction in lot sizes does not mean a reduction or smaller houses are going to be built. They are going to be decent home sizes, but most of the time the only difference will be a reduction in the backyard. And like I said, not everybody will be willing to have a 1 acre backyard or half-acre backyard. Some people want a bigger house but with a smaller backyard in order for them to be easily maintained. So that is the reason why the applicant wanted to give the city that option to have different housing sizes. If you look at the zoning map, to the north it's zoned R1, to the south is R1, and to the east it's also zoned. To the east there's no developments out there. One of the reasons why staff wants to recommend approval of this residential development is the fact that if you look at the eastern part of this property, it's all vacant and it's now ETJ. Currently, our zoning ordinance does not extend into the ETJ. So anybody at all can go ahead and build on the eastern side of the property. They can actually put any manufacturing or industrial development in the ETJ, and we have no regulation to stop it. And so we believe that allowing this single family development on that vacant piece of property will be as a guide to determine what development will come in coming years. So currently, if we allow this development and somebody wants to put an industrial park or any commercial development, then the city would have a better option to argue that you have adjacent residential. So this will not be a better use for that area. But if this lot is left vacant and somebody decides to develop any commercial development on the eastern side of the property, it will affect all the development to the south and development to the north. So we believe for the city and the citizens to have a better way to protect future users, this subdivision would also be a good way to maintain that, because once it's zoned for residential development, then we can guide future development that would have an impact on that property and surrounding land uses. So staff believe this rezoning will not only allow for single family homes, but would also be a way to protect future land use within the subdivision, because as you can see on the map, on the eastern side, we have no color showing. That is in the ETJ. So any developments can go in there without any city restriction. So this subdivision, we believe, will be a best way for us to protect citizens living in all those lovely subdivisions along Appleby Sands Road. That is why staff believe this will be a better fit for the neighborhood if you look at it in the long-term run and for the protection of residential users. And as I've said earlier, the major difference between this zoning will within the R1 and the R2 is the lot sizes. And lot size, the reduction in lot sizes does not necessarily mean reduction in housing sizes. If you look at it in so many areas, people live in smaller houses which are quite expensive than bigger houses. It depends on the quality of the houses. And like I said, the applicant has already done a good job within the city, and I've driven around to see some of the job the applicant and his company has done, and I'm confident that if he repeats that in that subdivision, it will be a good addition to the neighborhood. We want to go ahead and look at the future land use map. It calls for the whole neighborhood to be zoned, to be designated as residential. If you look at a comprehensive plan for 2003, it says that there's the need for the city to consider a variety of residential types and densities, and also to preserve the character of existing neighborhoods. I said earlier, this rezoning can protect development on the eastern side of the city, of where it is located. As a planner, I always look at a long-term goal. If somebody decides to put in a toxic or chemical factory on the ETJ, which is on the eastern border of this, as you can see on the map. No city regulations can stop it. But this subdivision being a residential neighborhood, which about 60 lots, would give us a buying power to convince any commercial or industrial development that this will have an effect on residential. So we believe this is in line with the future land use map of protecting existing neighborhoods. Comprehensive plan, which was done by the city council and citizens at the time, also said there's the need to consider different housing choices and different housing styles. That also implies there's a need to consider different front yard, they need to consider different backyards. So if currently most buildings in the neighborhood have bigger backyards, but does that mean everybody wants to have a bigger backyard? The answer will be no. There's the need to consider other options to give people the options to choose various housing standards. In recent years, the housing development from the federal government has always talked about the need for cities to consider different housing choices, and I believe this will be a good fit and in line with the need for us to consider what the future of Nagbodoches and to encourage a lot of development within the city. When I moved in here, I've heard about a lot of people wanting to stay here after school to have a career and so many other stuff, but there isn't that option for working professionals to be able to buy certain kind of houses, because of it's either we have a very big house or a house that does not meet their market. So we believe this rezoning would allow for varying different housing choices. And like I said, the minimum lot size is 6,500, and some of the lot sizes are actually bigger than 6,500. So the fact that it's being zoned R2 does not mean all of them are going to be 6,000 square feet. We have some even being bigger than 8,250, which will be shown on the site plan as well. So I believe this is in line with our future land use map, giving us the option to have different housing choices and the option to protect existing land uses. Like I said, this will be a greater way for us to protect any development that will not be compatible with the neighborhood. Floodplain prevention, no part of this property lies within the floodplain, and so there wouldn't be any issues with that. But just for information, once it gets into the planning stages, the city considers the drainage. We consider so many other factors in the planning stage. We consider drainage, access, traffic, and so many other stuff. And all of this will be addressed, and we've already discussed that with the applicant, and we believe the applicant will do a good job to make sure this development fits well into the neighborhood. City did send out 18 notices to property owners. Initially, we did make a mistake of saying it was out there, but we did send one again to indicate exactly what we want. We didn't get any response in denial. I think I did get a call from citizens who said they were going to be at the meeting to voice out their opinion, and that is something that I really think is very necessary for us, for citizens to be very engaging in development that occurs within their neighborhood. Staff has reviewed this rezoning request, and we believe it will allow for a use that is compatible with the neighborhood. It's also going to be a catalyst to propel future development in the adjacent ETJ. And I want to stress again on this fact. If you look at the eastern part of the property, it's in the ETJ. Anybody at all, any developments can come in, and the city has no power to regulate it. But if we're able to get residential development along the eastern part of this of the city limits, then we can have a power to say all of that part is it's residential. So we don't want to see any commercial or any development that will not be harmonious with current users.
Mr. Manti, what is the development that's to the east of it right now? It looks like there's some streets and maybe a subdivision.
To the east, some of them are residential, but right adjacent to this property is vacant.
Right. Is it on the adjacent property?
On the adjacent
beyond
is
that?
it's all residence, I believe.
Yeah.
You're talking about where it's white.
Yeah, it's white.
It's Wellington Point, Deer Trace, Hunter's Ridge, and all that.
So what I'm saying is right at the edge of that, the proposed rezoning area. It's vacant. If somebody decides to clear every building and put an industrial park, commercial development, the city, the county cannot tell them not
To the north of that, correct?
To the north and to the east. We,
Parcel in between the.
yeah, the parcel from, yeah, which has no colors. It's all in the ETJ. So we don't have any power to tell them what to do because, and of course they can always argue that a larger part of that part is vacant. So then what is your take?
Sure.
But if we're able to allow residential development in there, then we can actually prevent any commercial or industrial development. We can have a buying power to convince them that if you put any commercial or industrial development, it will not be harmonious with residences. So based on a comprehensive plan, we believe this development will be a better way to protect all the development to the south, to the east, and to the north of this property. That is why staff believes it's a good rezoning initiation. This rezoning will also be, this development will be in accordance with section 118 and 90 of the City Code of Ordinance that looks at subdivision regulation and every other detail that has to do with building, setbacks, landscaping, and everything that will make this neighborhood fitting, just like the neighborhood just adjacent to it. Staff therefore recommends approval of the rezoning because we believe it does not adversely impact on surrounding uses, and it's in line with the 2003 future land use map. I have a side view showing the property in question. It's very wooded, lovely subdivision surrounds it. I think right to the south of it, it's a lovely subdivision, and I believe we've discussed that, and the applicant knows what he's going into and proposes to build a nicer subdivision that will match what is existing in the neighborhood. I have a picture just showing a street view of the south, street view of the west, street view going north, and to the east of it as well. This is the property in question, very wooded. And our key points to note, the major difference will be a lot reduction from R1 to R2. R1 allows for 8,250 square feet. R2 allows for 6,000 square feet. The minimum, the average lot size based on what the applicant has submitted is 6,500. And then there will be decent home sizes with possible smaller backyards. Reduction in lot sizes does not mean smaller homes. It means decent home sizes with possible smaller backyard. And then this rezoning will maintain the character of current residential neighborhood, and it does allows for varying housing choices and necessity in Nacogdoches. At this point, I bring my presentation to an end, and I'll allow for public comments, and I'll come back if needed.
Thank you, Mr. Manty. This is a public hearing, so anybody wishing to speak for or against this proposal may come forward and voice your opinion. Yes, sir. Come on up. Introduce yourself if you would.
Apologies. My name is Randy DeRuyter. I'm with my wife Valerie. We're actually new to Nacogdoches, so I apologize for probably not being as prepared as I should be. DeRuyter, D-E-R-U-I-T-E-R. We have a lot immediately adjacent in the Bell Point subdivision that would be right next to them. I guess the comments I'd make starting on this, I am opposed to this change in seeing what's going on. And the main reason is I don't see a driving reason to change from R1 to R2, other than density. With respect to the previous speaker, I don't believe it's just simply a smaller backyard. This is going to be a higher density development. If you look at that whole area north Nacogdoches, it's all R1. And so you've got Bell Point. Apologies, I'll get name block on the development to the north. It's R1. If it were developed as R1, any concern about commercial development, which I don't believe is feasible, would still be okay. You develop under R1, you'd have the same argument. So this is entirely a density issue. It's more families, and it's also hitting, this isn't prairie land. I mean, it's just gorgeous there. There's these trees, I understand about developing, but you're gonna take it and you're gonna wind up wiping out a forest. And it's going to be very close packed houses. It's more than just a small lot. And I think other people, probably the folks behind me, are more impacted. But I'd say, we're lucky we have about an acre. That's a lot. I know it's big. But when I look at now, I'm going to have a retention pond next to me. It's not something I expected. At best, that's just water. At worst, it's a place for breeding insects. And we haven't had a drainage problem. I don't think we will, but it complicates our area. So I'd be looking for the developer. If we have to develop here, I'd stick with zoning R1. And I see no reason other than price or making more money that's going to convert this into a very densely populated. And I don't agree that this is in the same spirit as the rest of the development around Appleby. That a lot of people like to be separated. The out of city area is stable in my opinion. Those streets have been there for a long time. So the idea that commercial development is going to happen to the east, I disagree. Those folks are there. If they were invited to this meeting, I'm sure those neighbors, the people who own lots, wouldn't want this tight space development done as well. So that's my words for now. I just think it's the density that concerns me greatly.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Sorry, maybe lose my voice.
What's your name?
David Henson, Hinson. I do not have any complaint against the subdivision itself, but I do have a complaint about changing from R1 to R2. It's the reason we have zoning laws, or at least the reason I think we should have zoning laws, is to prevent, people come in and buy a piece of property based on the zoning around the piece of property they buy. And if you have the ability to change the zone from a higher density, lower density to higher density property, that kind of defeats having the zoning laws. And that's my way of looking at it. And I'm like the previous speaker. The only reason to do this is to increase or maximize the profits out of the piece of property by increasing the density of the housing that's going to be on it. That's my main complaint, and I'm against changing the zone. I'm not against the builder coming in there and building houses under the existing R1 zone regulations. I'm very concerned about how it's going to be built, how the drainage is going to be handled during the building process, whether silk fences are going to be put up, whether the drainage in the end is going to be proper so that everything goes to these retention ponds and not to my property. I'm in lot 39 of Hunter's Ridge. I have 400 feet of property that's going to be adjacent to houses that are being built on this piece of property. So I'm going to have, I'm not sure, I haven't really looked at the plot sizes very well, but I'm going to have probably 6, 8, 10 houses right next to my property. So drainage control is very important to me when they do this. And I'd also like to know whether there's going to be a fencing around this piece of property that's going to keep people from moving in and out of my property from theirs. This is going to radically change our way of living. And I guess that's all I have to say. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, sir. Oh, certainly, come on up.
I'm David's wife, Donna. And I wonder if you could put the map up, the second map you had, so we could show the property line. Our property line is about 400 feet, and it comes up beside our driveway and goes around to the back of our property.
Is this okay?
No, not that one yet. The next one, I think it is. Is that it? Oh, I'm sorry, that one right there. The long line to the right is the property that goes behind my neighbor and myself. We have the longest part of that property line. I will not have the privacy that I have had since moving to Nacogdoches in 2004. We lived in the Houston area, and I'll know what small lots are like. And the reason we didn't move back there, we had been transferred to Ohio and we moved back to Texas in 2004. And the reason I'm here is because I did not want to live in a neighborhood. I had lived on a half acre there, and you can't buy a half acre anymore. This is where we could buy property with acreage. We have almost 3 acres. We have a lot of wildlife. We have beautiful trees. I don't have as many trees on that side of the property as I do on the other side or the front. We have dogwoods, and those are disappearing. We have beautiful maple trees. And I'm gonna lose a lot of that. And I don't really wanna look out my window and see tin roofs with smaller backyards. And I do understand a lot of people do wanna live in a larger house on a smaller lot. But I really do think, an 8,250 size lot is small enough. I don't want a person's back door on my property line. It's too many people. I'm not against having a development in this neighborhood. I think it's fine. I think the city needs housing. And I have been over to Summer Hill, and I know what those houses look like, and I'm not sure what size those lots are, but they are small. I would have no objection to a smaller lot if it was for a 55 and over age group. But you're going to have anybody who can buy a house here. And I've already seen what these lots and houses are like in the Houston area. We live near Clear Lake. Eventually, those are the houses people are going to be able to afford, who have a lot of children. When those children become teenagers, they're not going to have a place to park their car. It's going to be on the road. It is not going to be like other neighborhoods that I see here in Nacogdoches. There is land everywhere in this county. So I don't really understand why we need to have smaller lots. I have been over to Broadmoor. Those houses are large. They're very expensive. I don't know what size lots they are, but they don't look like you can fit a 4,000 square foot house on a 6,000 square foot lot unless your fence is right at your back door. So I'm really opposed to this, because the reason I am living in Nacogdoches is because I can have some privacy and land around me. The drainage that my husband mentioned is important because we have a dry creek bed that runs from that property through our property down to the creek. So I'm concerned when all the construction is begun, what's going to happen to the drainage on my land. Also, I guess when my husband came up here to get a copy of the site plan, nobody thought there was going to be any effect to Bell Point, because you're going to have a nice retention pond. And retention ponds can be nice, but they can really be awful too, because we've seen that in Houston. Nobody seemed to know there's property behind that area, which is myself and my neighbors. Well, I don't know what's going to happen to the drainage to my property, because everything runs downhill. I live on a hill, and it all runs down to the creek. So when this property is all leveled, what does that do to my drainage? Is the developer going to make sure I'm not going to be flooded on part of my land? That's a concern to me, and I would like to hear, what the developer plans to do for our property, because he is taking care of Bell Point, but he's not really taking care of us. I guess there's nothing else I can really say other than my husband mentioned fencing. Most of these lots that are over in Summer Hill, and I would say that that is a very nice development. I think, I don't know if the same person developed that neighborhood, but if it is, he did a nice job. And it is nice at the current time, but what is it going to be like in 15 years? Now, maybe I'll be dead in 15 years and I won't care. But right now, I do care what it's going to be like. So everybody puts up a different kind of fence, and that's going to make my property look like crap. Is the developer also going to maybe leave some trees along the tree line? Because as I said, it's very wooded out there. There's lots of deer. There's foxes. There's bobcats, everything. That's going to be gone, and I won't be able to enjoy that, but I would at least like to be able to keep some privacy. Will he be able to do that with these small lots? I don't think so. I think it needs to remain zoned the way it currently is. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like got another speaker. If you'd introduce yourself, sir.
My name is Ray Stoner, and I would just like to ask 2 or 3 questions. On one of his slides, point number 3 is he wanted to maintain the current residential flavor or whatever of the area. And when you look at the picture, the subdivision to the right, those are 3-acre lots, and even Bell Point are larger than 6,000 square foot lots. So what, is he looking over at Broadmoor? He wants to, that as the flavor for the neighborhood?
You want me to respond?
Yes, if you will. Ray Stoner?
Well, when we talk about the character of a neighborhood, we are not saying you want, the word is maintain. I'm not saying it's going to be the same as the neighborhood. So the character of the neighborhood is, it's made up of single-family homes. I expect this development to be single-family homes. They have backyards, front backyards, well-maintained. I expect them to be the same, but not of the same size. I'm not seeing any commercial development. I'm not seeing any form of use that will be detrimental to what is already existing in the neighborhood. And I want to point out the fact that none of these, it's my personal opinion. I'm just going by what the ordinance and the comprehensive plan that was developed by the city and the citizens and the council wants us to do. So it's not that I am saying this, it's what the comprehensive plan says. But I do agree there are bigger lots, but maintain the character just means making sure that as you drive along the street, if it's all residential, you expect to see all residential. If it's built up, it's made up of brick houses with front setbacks, back setback, I expect you to say the same thing, but I'm not saying it should be exactly the same as what is existing.
Well,
Yeah.
So I would disagree. Green grass and pretty houses is not the same character. And if you drive through those areas there, that's not what you get. You get pretty houses with nice big lots, so it's not the same character. Number two, I'd like to ask, you probably know, and I've tried to find, is there a rule of thumb for the impervious areas for these high-density areas?
I mean, impermeable ground.
Is there a percent?
I don't know if we've got one. Is there a rule on a percent of impermeable ground on this development?
Well, we look at, you mean in terms of the drainage on sites?
Well, I'm thinking with
Like
houses and pavement.
Yeah, how
What-
much pavement is going in, and that's part of the reason for the retention pond is
Sure.
to catch some of that runoff
Once
caused
they
by
get to
the impervious.
144,000 square feet, 14,000 square feet, then it triggers getting a detention pond and all of those stuff. And like I said, even though it's not in the floodplain, our engineering department would rigorously dissect these developments for drainage. And at that point, if they don't meet the drainage requirements, then this development will not even come on.
Okay, could we go to this white slide?
Okay. Let me know if I get to that
Right
one.
there.
Oh,
Yeah.
this one?
No, that one.
Okay, great. And that is the floodplain showing on there.
If I can find myself, right? There's another slide closer to the area.
Oh, probably the aerial map, I believe. Is it this?
Right, that might be it. No, that was it.
Okay.
The slide shows a white, the blue line there for the creek.
Yeah.
And as Mrs. Henson said, most of this property drains to the south. And although that is on county property, if you follow it, it comes back into the city. And that's what one of my concerns is if 25% of this 16 acres is impervious, that's a whole lot. Wow. That's a whole lot of drainage coming to a stream that was never built to handle that. And it will be coming back into the city. So that's a concern I have. A retention pond is good if it's gonna stay there forever, but if it's just for the construction.
No, they're permanent fixtures.
Well, the problem with ponds is, once they're full, every drop that goes in, there's another drop that goes out. And so I hope this is really being engineered carefully. Because the soil here is pretty sandy at the site down there. So I hope that's going to be done very carefully. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody wishing to speak for or against? Come on
I'll
up.
say a couple words. So, Jason Barber is my name. So this is my first time to ever do something like this, so
Sure.
a little
Welcome.
intimidated, but you know.
Don't.
So first thing I want to make sure is that I'm clear is that I have a tremendous amount of respect for the person that's wanting to develop this property. I have no doubt that it'll be a nice project. Okay. I am concerned about it being an R2 as compared to an R1, right? And you know, I also, you know, I'm in the financial world, so I mean, I'm very, you know, pro-capitalism and want profit and all of that, but it seems to me that there might be, you know, seems if we can find a way to do it in an R1 that I would strongly prefer that. You know, one concern that I have, so my wife and I own property on the, I don't know how to describe it. If you look at this map, it would be like, I think it's right around here, like maybe 254, or on the opposite side of where it is, where the developments want to go in. But we have 13 acres that we bought there 3 or 4 years ago, I think, something like that. And plan on building our dream house, you know, as in I'm 32, Lord willing, I'll build it when I'm 35 and live there for 50 years, right? I mean, that's so, you know, the lady made a comment earlier about 15 years. I mean, I'm looking at 50 years, right, of, okay, this is, you know, something that's going to be there for a long time. You know, and the size house that we're planning on building is not one that we're going to be leaving, right? I mean, you know, they say, like, I mean, I'm planning on building myself a casket out there and bury me in the backyard type of a thing. And so, you know, one concern that hasn't been mentioned, you know, that I had was traffic on Appleby Sand, okay, in that, you know, I'm picturing that me pulling out of my driveway, you know, that the subdivision's not going to be immediately across from me, I don't think, but I don't know, within 100 yards maybe or something like that. And so if we're talking about an R1 versus an R2, maybe we're talking about 10 more houses or something, I think is what the developer mentioned. You know, you might be talking about 20 to 30 more cars, okay, that are going to be coming in and out of there, which, you know, I don't know how big of a deal that is, but I mean, to me, it seems like that's worth pointing out, right? And that's a concern that I have. If I'm going to be raising my children there and driving and pulling in and out of that neighborhood, and we've got, you know, an additional 20 or 30 cars pulling in and out of that neighborhood every day, I think that that's worth pointing out, and it's a concern that I have. The other thing that I think I got my answer to that I came here a little bit concerned about was the definition of R2 and making sure that, you know, that there's a 0% chance that it could ever become HUD housing or rental properties or duplexes or other things like that. I understand that everybody has the right to rent their house, right? But I think we all know what I'm referencing, in that we don't want it to become, or certainly wouldn't want it to become a trashy neighborhood. And I know that the developer has zero intention of that, but with regards to the definition of an R2, that was a concern that I had. And I think that you know, I think that we can all agree, or correct me if I'm wrong, there's no possibility of that being the case, right?
Would you mind defining the R2 exactly? So everybody's
I
on the
mean,
same page?
I understand that he may not have the intention, but I'm
Okay.
concerned about the legal definitions of what can and cannot be there. If literally the only difference is the lot size, then I've got no concerns.
If I can give a brief history of why cities adopted different levels of single-family zoning, is the fact that we might have a family with kids. They can afford to have a big backyard, and afford doesn't mean with price. It means they would love to have a big backyard and have all the amenities that they want. So minimum lot size 8250 to allow for a big backyard. Then we might have a medical doctor who doesn't have time to stay home and maintain his yard. So zoning came with that rule that let's have lovely residential neighborhood just like the bigger lots, but with smaller lot sizes, so that a medical doctor, a lawyer who is probably single or just have a wife and one kid and wouldn't have the time to maintain a big backyard can also buy a house of the same quality but would have a smaller lot
Mr.
lot
Manti,
sizes.
what's the street frontage like on R1 versus R2? How many?
They're going to be the same. There's
Yeah.
no difference. It's
60
only, like I
feet,
said,
I
the
believe.
major difference has to do with the back, the rear setback, which is 20 on R1 and 15 on R2. So it's the same thing. That is what I'm saying. The major difference will be the backyards and the front setback. That the difference in the setbacks, but they are all said to be the same. I've worked in about 5 or 6 different cities, and in all these cases, they have different levels of R1. And the idea is to encourage people, working professionals, who can afford to buy expensive homes but don't have the time to maintain the backyards, to also fit into such neighborhoods and feel comfortable with the money that they earn. So the R2 is not going to allow for rental homes or any other development. It's going to be single family homes with emphasis on the fact that not everybody can have the time to maintain bigger backyards or front setback. I know so many, I've talked to medical doctors in this city who have told me that there's the need for Nagordoches to have certain housing types that would allow them to live comfortably but not have to maintain bigger backyards and front setback because they don't have the time to do it. Not just doctors, but other working professionals as
yeah.
well. So that is the major difference between them.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Last question then that I have, I think, is, and this is probably a question for you to respond to as well. You know, so in my preliminary, very amateur research, I looked at the zoning map of, you know, all of Nacogdoches. And if you split Nacogdoches in half, let's say north and south, and you look at all of north, I could be mistaken, but I don't think that there's a single R2 zone in the northern half of Nacogdoches, if I'm not mistaken. Is all R1 commercial or planned developments, okay? So I guess I've heard different explanations of R2 versus planned development, and it sounds like there's pros and cons to both options, but that's another question I had is, if we're wanting smaller lot sizes, what are the positives or negatives of a planned development as compared to an R2, you know? And because my amateur, not knowing what I'm talking about, understanding, you know, is that a planned development means that we're coming here in front of this organization and literally laying out a blueprint for exactly what this whole thing is going to look like, exactly where each house is going to go, exactly how big each yard is going to be, what's the fence going to look like, what's everything, and that has to be approved down to the nitty-gritty detail. That's, again, I could be wrong, but I think that that's my understanding, as compared to an R2, basically gives the developer a little bit more flexibility, which is good to an extent, you know, but I guess that's the other question that I have, is that if R2 is so great, why is it that there literally is not another one in the northern section of Nacogdoches, and it's all on the southern part of the town? So that was the other question I had.
Excuse me, did you get a site plan?
I've not gotten anything.
Okay, we got a site plan, and I assume that site plan is based on the R2, is that correct?
Sure.
Okay, so you didn't get.
Yeah, I didn't get a copy of that. I'm sorry.
Well, to talk about the plan development, the reason why the planning department, once again, this is nothing personal, it's all based on the ordinance, is if we allow a plan development in that part of the city, plan development gives them the option to reduce the street sizes if they want to. It gives them the option to...
But it has to be approved, though.
It has to be approved. It gives them the option to further reduce the lot sizes.
Mm-hmm.
It gives them the option to reduce the setbacks. It gives them so much flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the hierarchy of the zoning ordinance, from R1 we go to R2. So we felt that it was better to put in the R2 to actually tie them more with the R1 than the plan development. Because the plan development gives the developer so much flexibility. With plan development, with my experience in various cities, they can show us some nice rendering, beautiful pictures, and that will sell the property. But I looked at the fact that surrounding land use, surrounding houses are bigger, have bigger setbacks and all that. So I was trying to get something that was closer to the R1, because the plan development actually gives them so much flexibility. They could do even smaller lots than that. That is why we...
But it has to be approved, though.
It has to be
right?
approved,
So
yeah.
that's the big thing.
So they're
is
still
that
going to
more
come back to...
flexibility, but
It
has
will come
to
back
be,
to the same thing, but we feel the R2, it's more geared towards the R1. The only difference, once again, I want to stress on the fact is that it allows for smaller setbacks, which would therefore give a smaller backyard. So
I'm not sure I understand what you just said. Did you say being an R2 allows a developer to change from 6,000 to smaller?
no, the plan
The plan development.
gives the developer the option
you
to...
basically present a plan that
Plan.
could show a 5,000 square foot but it has to be approved, right? It has, like, it's kind of a custom.
Smaller, and a planned development can actually go to the extent of reducing.
Well, I really don't like the sound of that.
Yeah, let's not let this devolve
Yeah,
into
sorry, I just
crosstalk.
was asking the question just because I noticed other areas where that went. My last question, and then I'll shut up.
Sure.
So,
Sir, this gentleman's got the mic right now.
sorry, yeah. So my last question is this: I want to better understand the process of, okay, so we all get up here and we express our opinions, and that ultimately just comes down to the three of y'all.
And our recommendation goes on to city council,
And then
and they ultimately approve it.
They ultimately are the ones that make
Yeah,
decisions.
and you can speak in front of city council as well.
Okay.
It depend, if this does move on
Okay.
from
And
here.
I think if it's denied here, then
Gotcha.
and I also want to point out the fact that this is just me talking from the ordinance. So if PNZ denies it today, I believe the proposal is for 60 lots. The applicant can still go in and build about probably 45 or 50. So
Yeah.
the numbers is not really a major difference here. This proposal is up for about 60 lot. When I did my calculations, if they want to go with the R1, it's probably going to be around 40, 45, almost 50. So it's, I personally don't see much of a big difference here. But
Like I
yeah,
said, I mean, it's 30 cars. Like if you go the traffic, I mean, it's I don't know.
What's
Like I
the
said,
what's the speed limit right there? Is it 70,
55?
55?
Yeah.
I would think cars slowing down to make a turn would probably mitigate that to some degree. If there's
And I want to point out one thing with TxDOT. I had a chance to work with TxDOT a lot in Central Texas. The only way TxDOT will want to reduce the speed limits on the street will be based on the number of residents along that street. So if this development comes in and increases the number of people in that subdivision, then TxDOT will realize that there's more residents. There's the kids are going to come in, school buses and stuff like that. So then they will sit down and reassess the speed limit on that street. But as it is now, TxDOT will say there's less density, and so we'll just leave it as it is. So it has its pros and cons. So yeah. So for speed reduction, then density would come in.
So, anyways, like I said, got no problem with the contractor, but would prefer R1 over R2.
okay. Thank you, sir.
How's this gentleman?
Well,
You need to come to the mic, please.
Yeah.
It's not recorded, so. Yes, sir.
David Henson. I don't want to make a big deal out about that, but I just really don't understand the flexibility of R2. I mean, what I think I heard said was once it's changed to R2, they can change the size lots to anything that they want to that they can get approved. I understand.
that's
it
a
has to
plan development. That's a different type of zoning.
Okay. So that doesn't have anything to do with this meeting.
No, sir.
Who handles that?
Well, the developer would have to apply for a plan development, I believe.
It'd be a whole different.
Yeah, they
Okay, this has very bad vibes to me. I don't like the sound of it. I mean, it's like it's an arbitrary code.
well, it's not what we're voting on, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody is a developer here?
Hello, my name is Kyle Drury. I'm a resident here. I'm here to speak up in favor of it. Along with Mr. Barber, I do share the capitalism part of it. I manage a family-run business here, and we attract people from as far as New York. Got some guys from North Carolina, and this is a very attractive part of town. And I understand that it's a beautiful part of town, and it's also where everybody wants to move to. I myself live in Broadmoor across the street. I myself share your enthusiasm with the wildlife. There's a doe and two fawns basically in my front yard every evening, and so what I'm saying is, a young couple coming in at the 35 to 40-year-old range, it's not everybody can live there because there is not an option. And I believe that this would be a good development. Also, like I said, I'm a contractor, so I stand to get some work out of this, which I believe which I believe development is vital for the city of Nacogdoches, for our county, and what economic impact it will have. I see that it's vital to Nacogdoches. And but I will also say this about the contractor. I've known Mr. Chris for many, many years, family, friends, with my parents. But Mr. Chris cares about his clients, and I've seen him go in and do the right thing and do things where a lot of other contractors wouldn't do. Like I said, I'm in that type of business, and I've seen him bend over backwards to work with his clients and also the neighbors. So, like I said,
I see in your proposal, it looks like you're going to try to maintain a park-like type of landscaping on site. Maybe you could talk about any tree preservation you plan on doing, or some of the things that the adjacent landowners are concerned about.
okay, I'd let Mr. Chris answer that. The last thing I would like to say, because I don't know all the details
Sure.
in and out. Last thing I would like to say to Mr. Barber's comment about the Appleby Sand Road, I believe it was about 7 years ago. TxDOT came in, put 10-foot shoulders on that road, and added a middle lane, which is, and I turn in and out of Broadmoor every day. Like I said, that's where I live, and 7 years ago, I would say that was a very valid concern, because that was a 2-lane road with 4-foot shoulders, and with the addition of the 10-foot shoulders and the middle turn lane, it's helped out a lot. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Crisp.
Name's Kim Crisp. I'm the one doing the development here, or proposing to do it. I see we got a lot of opposition, so I guess I want to speak about maybe the positives to the subdivision. I really haven't done a whole subdivision before. I have completed Colony Creek, probably half the houses in there. Summer Hill, I bought initially about 16 lots in there before it was completely sold out. I ended up buying the remaining lots there, which was about 16. So I've probably done about 3/4 of the houses in Summer Hill. Summer Hill is a PD development, and when I came to the decision to try to do this subdivision, I came to the city of Nacogdoches with the idea of doing a PD development. We had a pre-construction meeting and
Plan development, sir.
yeah, plan development. Talked with Leo, talked with the planning and zoning, talked with the engineers of the city of Nacogdoches, and at the pre-construction meeting, and we came to the conclusion that R2 was actually a better scenario for this area. A couple of reasons why. In the plan development, they do require some green belt area. It's not a lot, but there is some required. And I did want to put some green belt area in this new subdivision, primarily in the front part. I don't know if you've been by the property, but there's a huge embankment when you come into it. And our idea is to cut through that embankment, leave that embankment on both sides, and then cut down a little behind it and level it out and leave that buffer zone there for a couple of reasons. One, so the neighborhoods are not as visible from the street, and the other is from a noise factor from the street. So the plan that we've developed, which I developed the plan with Weir and Associates, who is they have an office in Henderson, Texas, and they also have one in Dallas, Texas. They've done numerous subdivisions, and it's one of their primary primary jobs that they do is in engineering. I've been working with Jake Fears. He's the engineer. We do, to answer some of the people's concerns, which I understand their concerns. They have homes there. It is engineered by a licensed engineer in the state of Texas. He is calculating the drainage and runoff, doing perk tests over in the property. There is a creek there that the water will go into. And I've got the same thoughts about retention ponds as some of the comments I've heard today. They become unsightly at times. They're just a hole that catches water and releases it at a given rate. That's basically what they do. That has to be engineered, and it doesn't matter if it's R1, PD, R2, or commercial, there's going to be a retention area there. The city of Nacogdoches requires it. So my idea is to make it more of an architectural feature. It will be a small pond in there. It'll have adequate retention for water that runs off the area. It's all calculated by the engineer. We're going to build a track around it. It's just a green belt track for walking. We do want to have a homeowner association in the neighborhood, which will, part of their responsibility will be to keep that mowed, keep it clean. A lot of the retention areas you go in now, they're grown up, so that's one thing that I think that'll help with that problem. The entryway, we want to, like I was saying, we're going to have a buffered zone there. We want to plant the entryway, maybe some native plants, have an attractive looking entryway. So that comes to the difference between R1 and R2 as far as the city and myself are concerned. The basic difference that I see is the square footage of the lots, and I believe it's 6,000 on R2, 8,200 on R1. Basically, we can put the same amount of lots on that piece of property with R1. That's we've calculated it. The engineers calculated it. It can be done. We can still put approximately 60 lots in R1. The problem with that is it doesn't leave any room for those green belts that we want to put in. It takes that up. It takes that space up. So if we go R2, we're going to leave some area that will be undeveloped in there, green belt area, primarily in the front and the perimeters of the subdivision. That area will have native trees. Basically leave it like it is. Now that doesn't keep a lot owner from changing that. They will own the property. Their lot they will own up to the lot line. But it will allow the developer, myself, to leave some of that in there. The lots will be approximately 60 feet wide. They're going to range maybe a minimum of 115 feet deep, but most of them are more in the 120 to 140 foot range. Just due to the nature of the lots, I mean, the land that's over there. When the subdivision was laid out, these lots are much deeper than the ones in the PD development that I've worked in Summer Hill. Summer Hill's lots are 58 feet wide. They're 112 feet deep. That's on the perimeter of all the lots there. Of course, the lots in the corners are different, and a few of the corner lots are different size, but basically they're 58 by 112. The lots that I'm proposing are going to be 60 feet, and like I say, they're going to range 110 to 15 and more. They'll be deeper, and it just because of the lay of the land, some of them are going to be deeper, but they're not going to be smaller. But like I said, when I came to look at this, I thought, well, I'm going to go PD. PD allows me to go zero lot line. I can actually put the house right on the lot line, which I can do in Summer Hill. Usually I've put them 18 inches off the line with driveway beside them, and you end up having about 15, 16 feet between the houses. the R1, if I'm not mistaken, and R2, they're both 5-foot setbacks, 6-foot setbacks on the sides. That will remain the same. So it's gonna be a little different setup. We're gonna have a 6-foot setback, which means we're gonna be 12 feet between houses minimum. I think you can put the driveway over closer, but the structure has to be 6 foot from the line. The setbacks on the front, I believe, are 20 feet. 20 feet, and that's the same on R1 as it is? Yeah, 25 on R1, 20 feet on R2. The PD development, which I initially came in looking at, allows a 27-foot wide street. That will save me considerable money over doing a 32-foot street, which I agreed to do because upon the recommendation of the city of Nacogdoches. So the R2 will have a 32-foot minimum street. R1 would be the same, 32. So I guess my biggest, the biggest asset that I can see in R2 over R1 is that it allows me more space, more unbuildable land to remain in that subdivision for that buffer zone in the front, and also to leave some perimeter trees there. Obviously, we're going to have to take some trees down in that subdivision. I'm like the man that talked about, you know, it is a beautiful forest. When you walk in it, it's beautiful, but we can't leave all the trees. You know that. So anyway, that's I'm just trying to answer some of the questions I've heard. We have an engineer. We're paying an engineer to do this. It's all engineered. The city of Nacogdoches is overseeing it. There is one plus that the city of Nacogdoches is going to gain out of this subdivision. There's I believe I don't know if it's a 4-inch or 6-inch water line that's about 500 foot from the property, but we're going to take bids to have that moved all the way up to where the subdivision goes. And also, we talked with the engineering staff here. They asked if I'd be willing to survey further south on Appleby Sand so that they could procure bids to extend that line even further south so they could tie the line together to an existing main, which would help on distribution of the water and also pressure related problems. That will be a benefit to to everyone around there. I don't think the house numbers are going to change a lot, whether it's R1 or R2. It's just going to allow us to have a little more greenbelt area. So that's primarily why we're going to R2.
Okay. Anybody else got any questions?
I have a question.
Well, let's let the board members ask any questions they've got first. Thank you. Any questions?
He answered the question I had was there gonna be a difference in the houses, the number of houses for R1 or R2? I think you just answered that.
I don't, you know, we've looked at it both ways with the engineer. It's possible to put, it's over 16 acres of land. It's possible to put 60 houses on it, whether it's R1 or R2. It just changes up the, like I say, in most of those lots, or I was just calculating here earlier, a 60-foot lot that is 100 foot deep is 6,000 feet. I don't think we have a lot in there, and I could be wrong. This is a preliminary plat, and we don't have a lot of the measurements on it. But from talking to the engineer, I don't think there's any lots that are going to be that small.
6,500.
Right. Okay, but 6,500?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about another, what's that, another 10 feet. So there's not any lots that are going to be that small anyway. But there's going to be some that are going to fall under the 8,200. There's going to be some that fall in that 6,500 to 8,200. But some of them are going to be, there's some of them that are well over 8,200, I'm sure. But when you take an irregular piece of land, you can't make them all the same. So, and we are trying to save a little bit of land, so that we can make that entryway, conceal the subdivision a little more for multiple reasons.
Sure. All right. Thank you, Mr. Griff.
Okay, thank you.
Ma'am, did you have a comment?
Well, I have a question. Will you say your name? Valerie DeRuyter. DeRuiter. I guess I'm a little confused because you said R1 would be 10 to 15 houses less than R2, and he's saying R1 will be the same amount of houses as R2. Personally, 10 to 15 houses is a lot of difference when your land butts up against it. That's a lot of, 10 to 15 houses is a lot. But he's saying there's no difference, so which is it?
Okay, so what I'm saying is, with my recommendation, if I want to maintain all the green spaces, all the parks, and all the good things he wants to bring in, then it's going to be shorter than that. But he is not required by law to do that. So by law, he can do 60 houses.
No matter if it's R1 or R2?
No matter if it's R1 or R2.
How does that affect the drainage?
So
more houses?
He's going to get engineers to do that. But we as a city are actually twisting his arm to build the same quality of houses and at the same time provide parks, preserve all the trees and make it a better subdivision. But if we decide to just let it go, he can go in and build the 60 houses that he wants to. But what I'm saying is
so we're going to get 60 houses either way, is what you're saying, pretty much.
But if we allow it for R2, then we are going to get 60 houses, but we're going to get a park, a walking trail, a nice detention pond, and a lot of green belts around the building.
So the houses will be smaller?
The houses wouldn't be...
They almost have to be if you're going to get all that in
there
too.
The yards are going to be smaller. When we talk about smaller houses, I always go back to the definition from the federal government. The minimum square footage for a house is 800 square feet. So I don't want to talk about house being smaller, but we always use the term decent sized homes that will yeah. But if we let it go, if the PNZ decides to deny this tonight, he can build 60 houses minus the lovely parks, minus all the trees.
So he can build anyway. So this is just a zoning.
It's not just, it's we, the city, trying to convince him to do something that will make the neighbors happy. And he's willing to do what we want to make the neighbors happy. He can decide to go in and do whatever he wants now, and we cannot do anything about it. But
he doesn't have to get permission?
He doesn't have to get permission. All he needs is a building permit with R1.
So he can already build?
Yes, but we as a city are trying to convince him to build 60 houses with smaller yards and provide all the trees around the lot.
I think that was a little bit of confusion.
Okay, great.
I was thinking that, you're denying or approving just building everything instead of zoning change.
Yeah, and that is why we didn't go with the PD. We want him to build something that will match the neighborhood. If not, if we decide to deny this and park and go home, he can go in, build the 60 houses. So as you drive into the subdivision, all you're going to see is houses and nothing else again, like in other areas. Right. But we want to encourage him to do a park. We want to encourage him to do a nice detention pond. We want to encourage him to leave all the trees surrounding that property. Yeah, that is why we are trying to. That is why we are trying to go.
Well, the retention pond, that's just a mosquito breeding ground. Let's be honest.
Well, and this is also a recommendation to City Council.
Yeah.
So whatever the board decides tonight is a recommendation to City Council.
So if y'all decide not to do R2, R1's going to be done anyway.
Sure.
And I think that probably would have been better explained at the beginning, because we're going to have houses behind us no matter what. We're going to have retention pond no matter what. Now it's just a matter of how this looks and how it's developed.
Great.
Mm-hmm. So that was the unclear thing.
Great.
We're saying R1, keep it R1, but you're telling us that R2 is going to give us a better, at least control.
Yes, exactly. And as a planner,
so I guess that should have been said at the beginning, because that was confusing.
That is my duty to ensure that developments actually matches the character of the neighborhood.
Because I kept hitting backyard size, and honestly, if you can afford a big enough house, you can afford to have somebody mow your lawn. So backyard size, to me, that's not, nothing. I'm sorry, but that's kind of nonsense to me. But it would have been, if it'd been more clear that this is gonna be built anyway, and then
Sure.
it's just how you control the building. I
Sure.
think that would have at least, you know, we all know now we're gonna have houses back there.
Yeah,
So now
regardless,
it's just a
the zoning
matter of
allows for it,
control,
yeah.
and that was very unclear
And,
at the
and I
beginning.
think it's not just control, it's a matter of the developer trying to please the city and citizens.
Right.
And most.
Right, but if that'd been explained at the beginning, I
Sure.
think we probably would have felt maybe a little bit more at ease, because we have no really say anyway, other than
I've
whether it's
worked,
R1 or
I've
R2.
worked in the city of Denton where the developer would tell you, I can do this based on the ordinance, don't tell me what to do, and then it ends there.
Right.
But when he came and we talked to him, he actually understood that we want the betterment for the neighborhood. So if he's going to preserve some trees and make it a nicer neighborhood, then he will go this route.
Right.
But if not, he could just decide to build whatever
Right,
he
but I'm
wants.
saying
So
that
we
was
really
totally
appreciate
not
him.
All right,
until
if you'll
just
excuse
now.
me 1 second, I think the development would, or the developer would like to address some of your concerns.
Clear some of that up. I've got my original, what I did, I took the piece of land and gave it to the engineer. I said, I want 60 lots, or see how many lots we can put on this. So he came up and he had about 58 to 60 lots. And he understood it's R1, and as well as I did. This is, I don't know if you can see this, but this is Applebee's Sand here. These lots that we first had designed, they backed up to Applebee's Sand all the way. So we started digging into it, and I said, you know, I really don't like that. And people don't, that's always the last lots to sell. They always sell, but they're always the last ones. It'd be nice if we could put a green belt in there. So I said, well, let's go PD. We'll go PD. I know we can put green belt in, it's required. We'll just put it on the front. We can make, you know, and one thing that comes with PD, you can make the lot smaller. You can, yeah, zero lot line. I mean, you can basically make it more dense if you want to. That's not the reason I did it. The reason I did it was when I met with Leo and in the engineering, they said, well, why don't you just go R2? That will allow you to do the smaller site, and we can save some of that land. So that's what I did. So this is the second drawing. And if you see all of this area in here, this is that green belt area when you come in. So the whole front of that subdivision, there are no lots backing up to that up to Applebee's Sand. It's just all a green belt area. And like I say, there's a big berm up there. I'm going to leave the berm and leave the trees, you know, as many of the trees as we can there, and then just kind of do natural landscaping on the way in. That's one of the pluses. Also, the other plus is, since it's a smaller requirement on the square footage of a lot, that will allow us to leave a little more room in the back of these lots and the perimeters. You can see these lots are much deeper than the ones in here. These perimeter lots are deeper, so it will allow the person that buys that house to leave trees there. They're gonna have the same concerns that you do. They're probably not gonna want somebody just right there in their backyard. So as a developer, I'm not gonna cut those trees back there, and I can't prevent the homeowner from coming in there and cutting trees, but there will be room for trees to be in that backyard on those perimeter lots. The other thing we did, this first plan, it just had a drainage detention area, which is normally what we have. They calculated how large it needs to be, and it was just gonna be a typical one. The new one plan that we came up with, we actually put a little green belt around it, which will be maintained. And there will be water in it at a low level, but there'll be water in it with a fountain in it to keep the algae down, and just for looks, for aesthetics. But it's just more aesthetically pleasing, I think, the drainage and detention area that we've got drawn into this now than what we had in the beginning. But that's primarily why we came up with R2. It's not so much for how many houses we can build. We can build the same amount either way.
Can I ask a question?
Thanks, sir.
If this is approved, do we have a guarantee that this is how it's gonna look, that this isn't gonna change at some point, or?
It's a preliminary
Oh,
plat.
right, it's preliminary, so
So-
if it gets approved and this changes, do we get to say something then? I mean, cause you're showing us this, and this is what we're arguing for or against, but,
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to
Inside-
vote on
inside
a
of this
final,
final
final plat, correct?
Yeah.
Or-
We
Yeah.
vote on the final plot.
Yeah.
right, but do we get a say if it changes from what we're seeing right here? Do we get to come back and say, hey, this is not what he showed us at the meeting?
Well, it is going to be a public hearing for this to get approved, and so you are still going to see it if he makes any changes to it, and then you can always make a
You'll receive
complaint.
another letter
Right.
because
Yeah.
Cause my fear is once it's decided R1 or R2, it's a done deal, and we're stuck with whatever he might change or
They're
do
still
differently.
They're still building, you know, building standards that he has to go by, and there's still other steps they have to go. This is just the preliminary.
Okay,
Yeah,
I mean, this is very pretty, but if it changes drastically, that changes how it affects us. I mean, my house is right here. That retention pond's coming 2/3 right up to my house in my backyard. I'm just saying if that changes drastically, then that really affects me.
I think, Craig, if you don't mind me, the changes that will come in this would only be a reduction in the lots. For example, if you want to take care of drainage, we might force you to reduce some of your lots. So any change that will come would actually have to be a positive one. But any negative change, we will not agree. So, for example, if he wants to increase the lots, we will not agree to it. We can actually, we would rather bargain for a reduction in the lots and not any negative change. And
Okay.
you correct me if I'm wrong, yeah. Any change that will come will be for a
But yeah,
positive
because
one.
that would be my concern, is if it gets approved and
I
if
think
something
that, I
changes
think this is
drastically.
gonna be a
we're in-
big improvement over what's there now.
I know, we got lots of trees there now.
You got lots of mosquitoes
It's hard
too.
to approve, well, we're gonna have more, you got water there, you're gonna be great now.
Can I make one comment real quick? Sorry, just to piggyback on what she was saying there. So like, again,
Come on up.
so again, with absolutely zero disrespect for Mr. Crisp. So let's say I'm going to present a wild hypothetical here. Okay, we all vote on this. We all say, "Yep, R2 sounds great." We saw that picture; it looks beautiful. Which I happen to. I mean, I like the way it looks, and I understand all of the arguments that were made of R1 versus R2, and you know, hey, we can still get the same number of houses if it's R1 and all of that. So again, wild hypothetical here. Since I know Mr. Crisp and I know he would never do this, I'm not concerned about him, okay? But now that this is an R2 property, I think what that lady was trying to ask is, okay, let's say, God forbid, Mr. Crisp dies and somebody else gets it. And they decide, well, you know what, now that it's R2, you know, I can just come in here and I can put 80 houses in here, right? I mean, it's R2 now, right? So
no.
you know, could they not just...
They're not going to fit that many houses on that
or however
property.
many, you know. But I could basically, I don't have to put all this green area
Well,
in here now and all these things that we want to have, and then Mr. Cripps is going to do, and I believe, and again, I'm not trying to be rude to you at all, okay? But the point I'm trying to make is that you know, how do we have any kind of assurance that, okay, that is what this is actually going to be, other than his word, which is very good, and I trust him. Okay, it's
You
not
can
that,
you
it's
can
just-
buy the property if you want to
Right.
control it
No,
100%.
you're right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I hope you don't mind me
Yeah.
raising
I
that
think,
question.
I think
so.
the purpose of this whole meeting is to look at the proposed plat and approve that proposed plat. And that is an engineered plat. That plat is gonna change very little unless, just like he was saying, if the if the engineer deems that we need more retention area, that could affect some of those lots just in that retention area, but it's not gonna affect them a lot. I've had the discussion with the engineer before. He's calculated already the size of that area, and he's put a hypothetical number together, how much retention area he needs, and he's drawn it to that number. When he actually gets on site, that could change to some degree, but it's not gonna be a lot. But as far as someone coming in that, I mean, I could drop over dead tomorrow.
Well,
I wouldn't be
I'm-
surprised if I don't.
Again, I'm not trying to be rude at all, right? I mean,
But,
I know it's a crazy
I mean,
scenario.
I've the last 3 subdivisions I've worked in, Colony Creek, Summer Hill, and now Broadmoor. I've bought the lots out in all of those. So I've basically gone and done what you're talking about. I've gone in and bought lots that another builder had actually developed the subdivision. The problem you get into in changing those lots is you can't just go in there and say, well, I'm gonna divide this lot into 2. That's not easy to do. You have to replat the subdivision, which is
You have to
not
come back here.
easy to do. Yeah, so it has to come back through the city to replat that. So to answer your questions, if this gets approved like it is, it's not going to change it. It's not going to be more lots or less lots, or it's just going to be. It's going to be what it is. for
I
a
think what a lot of
short
people's-
answer.
I think what a lot of people's concern are is that this lot, that it just say he did this and decided to sell it this before he did anything, that the plat would have to come back again and be reapproved, you know,
Right.
there's a change to it.
Gotcha. So we are approving that design.
Right, and
Like-
like I say, there may, some of the lot sizes may
Yeah,
change a little
yeah.
bit because of we need more retention area, but we know we're gonna have a 50-foot right-of-way for the street, that's standard. The only thing, like I say, the detention area could change slightly, but it's just gonna affect the lots that it touches. It's
Okay.
not gonna affect anyone outside of those lots.
That was my
All right,
question.
thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Ma'am, we've got to cut the discourse to bring it to an end. You've got 3 minutes.
I guess we didn't know when we came here today that really the city agrees with this or proposed it, because we didn't know he could build 60 houses with the current zoning. So I guess we don't know really what to do. I'm concerned because we're gonna have 6 to 8 houses going up our driveway in our backyard. How would you like to have 6 to 8 houses behind your house? I'm all for less houses with more green space, and I'm not gonna have that green space like he said. He's gonna have 20 feet that he's gonna leave the trees, and that will be those 6 to 8 neighbors I'm gonna have in my backyard. We have lived in another state where what they did is they developed the retention ponds like he is going to do, only they made beautiful retention ponds that attracted wildlife, geese. It was wonderful, but he doesn't have enough property to do that. The appraisal district says it's 16.3 acres. So you can't do that with 60 houses no matter what the zoning is. I don't know whether I can oppose this or say, okay, do it. All I know is in this city, in this county, with all the land you have, I think you need to make it more beautiful here to attract people from Houston, Dallas, Denton, wherever, because this is what people want. And yes, there are people who want small lots, especially senior citizens. We do need over 55 neighborhoods, but this isn't what this is going to be. And I really would appeal to you to do something that's less houses and more green space, because this is what people want. There's no place for children to play, and there will be children there, unless they're gonna play in the retention
The
pond.
walking trails,
Yes.
you don't think would work?
Well, I won't have a walking trail all along my 400 feet. So I understand the situation, and I understand you have a piece of property that you need to maximize the profits, but gee, if you drive around this county, just driving to Tyler, look at how much land there is, and I know it's not near the city.
Yeah.
So I don't know where things stand now that I realize he's gonna put 60 houses there no matter what.
Thank you. All right, I would call for a motion. Is there a motion to approve?
Also move.
Is there a second?
I will second.
All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried. And with that, we go to,
Can you announce this goes to City Council on August 21st?
this will go to City Council on September 1st?
August 21st.
August 21st, I'm sorry, where you will have a chance to speak to City Council about it. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Item 4 on the agenda, lessons learned from APA elected and appointed officials planning workshop.
Great. No, that's recorded. That's fine. Keep it recorded. Did you stop it? That's okay. So there was this APA conference in Tyler on was it August 1st? Yeah, and I wanted those who went to briefly give us a view of what they learned out there. So I'll call on Tyler and also introduce. I'll call on Caleb and introduce Caleb. If you come over, it was in Tyler. Yeah.
Excuse me, folks, can we take the crosstalk outside? We've still got the rest of the meeting to get to. Thank you.
So this wonderful gentleman here is Caleb Hill. He's the new planning intern. So I'll let him introduce himself and tell us why he decided to intern with the city before we go ahead with our discussion. Yeah, please
Sure.
go ahead.
Okay. So, thank y'all. My name is Caleb Hill. I'm from a little small town of Joaquin, Texas. Grew up there my entire life. Came to Nacogdoches, studied at SFA. I'm currently studying a master's in public administration. I'll be working toward that for the next 2 years. I've had an interest in planning for maybe 6 months, I'd say. My bachelor's is not in planning, it's in criminal justice. Thought I'd go be a lawyer, and that died really quickly when I got into the lawyer business. Learned that I enjoy helping citizens have a voice, help them design their city a little better, advocate for smart growth, smart economic development, housing affordability, all that fun stuff. Leo went and spoke at one of my classes, so that's where I saw the interest. He offered me the internship, and I'm like, this is too good of a deal to turn down. So in just, a week, I've learned so much. Ran around to the animal shelter. I've ran around, helped, sat in with business, building, code inspection, all that fun stuff.
To go to the wastewater plant yet?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, that's always your.
But it's been an exciting time in just 1 week. I'm excited for the next 6 months here. It'll be very interesting to be able to see and to be able to help out.
You've seen one tonight.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I'll let you
Goodness.
start. He was at the training. So if you just 1 minute tell us what you learned out there.
You sure you don't want 30 seconds? Yeah. So me and Jerry and I think Ajay, yeah,
There as well.
Stephanie, yeah, we went to the planning and or the workshop out in Tyler. What was it, about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago?
It was July 31st.
July 31st. That's when we went. And there was about 4 things that we, 4 kind of workshops we went through. The first one was the history, introduction to planning and zoning, general theories, seeing what planning has done in the past, to be able to see theories, to be able to help with Nacogdoches, to be able to help see how we can improve in that regard, to be able to understand what we've been through, especially with East Texas. Then we touched upon subdivision laws, subdivision regulation. That's something that I have no experience in, so that was that was good to know, especially when you have a time right here where we're talking about subdivisions and planning development. Then we ran through ethics, and ethics, I mean, I don't foresee me having to run into ethical problems as the intern, but I mean, I'll try and keep Leo out of problems, you know? And what was the last point on?
I don't remember what the last one was now. It was.
Oh, it was the legal issues and all
Yeah.
that. And
It
that,
had to do with the different Senate and what's going on in the state regarding that.
yeah, and so he just put up a big old, not a PowerPoint, it was just running through the Senate, Texas Senate, on what different bills passed and what didn't pass. So, but
That's great. We call him Jerry.
He said it all.
No,
did I?
Yeah,
that is what he had.
yeah.
Yeah, Leo gave us the opportunity, and hopefully he'll find us some more workshops and things like that to go to. It wasn't but $15 fee to register, and the lunch was worth that. And it was packed. There was a lot of people from different areas. It was at the police department, one of their training rooms there in Tyler. Yeah, they gave the introduction to planning, and zoning, subdivision regulations, and, I guess being here 12 years, I kind of really was already familiar with some of it, but as far as like the legislative and legal issues and all, that was something that that was interesting to me, and something that I had not really focused on in the past. Ethics for decision makers. Then at the end they had a question and answer session, and where you could ask any questions, and some did ask questions. So, but yeah, appreciate Leo for finding that for us to go to, and maybe in the future we'll have some more things like that to attend and get to bring y'all along with us also, because it was just, it was like from 10 to 3, and it was just enough time So,
Thanks,
Some
Jerry.
some takeaways that I had from it. Obviously, the first session was pretty interesting. It talked about just how it actually had evolved from the history of how zoning and different plats and platting and that sort of thing, how it all had started from, probably several hundred years ago, and how it's evolved. Then they've talked about something that was important to me is some issues that they've had issues that's been in the past about planning and zoning, those sorts of things. I was really surprised they didn't bring up like Houston, for example, but other things that, other areas that hadn't worked. That was very interesting to me as well, just kind of learning. They had some takeaways from different parts of Texas and different areas that, some of the speakers were from and had a good understanding of. Then the legislative was, it's surprising to me, again, the legislative side of it, how many bills or how many things are involved in that. I mean, there was, oh my gosh, probably 100 realistically now on each legislative summit or each legislative session, that there's something to do with this part of it. There's probably 100 different bills that had bits and pieces of it that was really, I mean, some of it was a pretty big deal, that's being talked about and being discussed on every legislative summit. So for me personally, it was something to really start paying attention to every time that comes up. I mean, there's, thousands and thousands of bills, but some of that was pretty, game changing could be if things passed or whatever. So kind of paying attention to that was important to me as well. And then obviously the ethics was in there as well. But which was important as well. So just being from elected officials and volunteers and whoever else, and just being part of this system, just really reiterating about the ethics part of it, I think was important too. So it was very beneficial. I think it was well worth the time and effort to go, and I hope for some additional training. I definitely. I didn't know going into it, what it was going to be about.
Sure.
And it went by quick. So, I mean, it was, 4, 5, 6 hours, whatever it was. And it was, they had good people speaking, and I was really surprised about the attendance. I mean, it was a packed house, and everybody stayed and was really intrigued, and had a lot of good questions. And so I learned a lot from that too, listening to other people's questions and being able to having other people answer that. And so it was very interactive and very good. So definitely, again, like I said, worth the time and effort. So
sure, and I think thanks to the city management, city manager, because I think we have budget to take
Some
your own
additional
training and stuff like that. So I'll look out for more training.
Sure.
And then hopefully the next time everybody can participate in it. Okay, all right. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And that concludes this meeting. We'll call it adjourned.